colonialism have been staples of humanity since the dawn of time. History is nothing more than repeated patterns, and oftentimes fiction warns us of these patterns. Hello everyone, my name is Arn Singh, and this video essay will be looking at comparisons between Frank Herbert's Dune, specifically the actions of the Atreides house on the desert planet Arrakis, and comparing that with actions of America in the Middle East in the early 2000s, specifically in Iraq. It is important to note that for the entirety of this video essay, although clips from the movie Dune 1 and Dune 2 will be played, I will be referencing to the book rather than the movies. The books delve deeper into the political scene and provide a different scope than the movies do, in my opinion. Prior to my argument, I will briefly give some context about the world of Dune. As many of you know, Dune takes place in a futuristic world where humans have colonized galaxies and space travel between planets is commonplace. Space travel is extremely important in the world due to the impact it has on the trade and economy of separate planets. The main driving plot point of Dune, however, is that this highly important space travel is only possible due to a raw material called spice. It is important that you remember this for the remainder of the video. This is analogous to how ships, trucks, and planes in our world are extremely important for trade, but they are all reliant on oil. In Dune, spice is only found on a singular, uninhabitable desert planet called Arrakis. This planet is extremely contested due to the importance spice has on the economy. Whoever controls Arrakis, the desert planet, controls the outflow of spice and therefore has a grip on the economy and the market in the Dune universe. There are also native peoples living on Arrakis called the Fremen, who are constantly manipulated and abused by whoever has control of the planet, as whoever has control of the planet does not care for the people or the planet, they just care about how fast they can extract spice. This system is eerily similar to our current world, except for instead of Arrakis, we have the Middle East, instead of spice, we have oil, and instead of the Fremen, we have Middle Eastern people. This is the main talking point of this video. Unlike our current world and its democracy, however, Dune utilizes a system more commonly found in medieval Europe, where certain houses rule over planets and serve more as empires rather than nations. A comparison in our universe would be something like the House of Tudor, where instead of democratic elections, the ruling family stays in control of an empire until they are usurped. The main houses in Dune that we will be focusing on are the House of Atreides and the House of Harkonnen. The House of Atreides can most easily be compared to modern-day United States. The time period in the book we will be focusing on is when the House of Atreides has just been given control of the desert planet Arrakis, thus giving them control of the most important natural resource in the Dune universe, spice. In both universes, people are taken advantage of and communities and environments are hurt. But we will specifically be looking at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in order to pinpoint specific ways both of these quote-unquote empires are violating sustainable goals and development in both Arrakis and the Middle East. In Frank Herbert's Dune, the Atreides present themselves as benevolent when ruling the planet Arrakis. The United States has overseen a similar yet less direct rule over the Middle East. Although some may argue that these nations come to these regions to promote peace through allowing democratic participation and inspiring hope, they both manipulate the definition of democracy to violate essential sustainable development goals such as peace, justice, and strong institutions, and good health and well-being. Beginning with the violation of the Sustainable Development Goal of bringing good health and well-being, or SDG 3, a large focus on the Sustainable Development Goal is the promise of equality within the area. The citizens in the environment must both also be thriving, and the area itself would need to be well protected. America initially began its occupation by attempting to promote democratic ideals in Iraq. This was a large reason why some initially viewed the American occupation as benevolent, as they attempted to bring democracy by making Iraq hold multi-party elections, causing them to have peaceful transfers of power since 2005, according to Dewisha from the Journal of Democracy. However, just because a country is democratic does not mean that every citizen is inherently succeeding in doing well. Arguably, a country run under a dictatorship can be more sustainable than a democratic country as long as they focus on not violating the Sustainable Development Goals, according to the UN. During the democratic occupation of Iraq, journalists documented extensive civilian casualties caused by America's use of airstrikes on Iraq. This obviously directly violates the Sustainable Development Goal, focusing on good health and well-being, and shows that even if a democracy is brought to a country, it does not mean that the native people's well-being and quality of life will automatically be good or ensured by the ruling country. Now, switching over to Dune, when the Atreides initially take control of Arrakis, they present themselves as peaceful, especially compared to the previous House Harkonnen that initially controlled the planet and ruled over the Fremen. Prior to the Atreides taking over, the House of Harkonnen would commonly abuse and rule through pain, according to the Dune book. However, even as the Atreides come in and take control from the Harkonnen, the overall structure of oppression is very prevalent under the Atreides. Although they might not be as brutal as the Harkonnen once were, they still are seen as superior to the native Fremen people and care more about extracting spice rather than the quality of life for the native peoples. The ruler of House Atreides, Duke Leto Atreides, himself mentions that they are the good rulers of Arrakis. The Fremen will eventually come to trust us. Herbert allows this quote to be put up to interpretation depending on the reader, but to me it's a display of how the Atreides seek to gain the Fremen's trust primarily, which is why they must act as good rulers, rather than actually care for their well-being. By gaining their trust, the Atreides will likely have an easier time extracting spice. To further add on to the Atreides' colonial mindset, Duke Leto, the ruler of House Atreides, mentions that he wants to make the desert turn green. This is a key component of the colonial mindset that the ruling House Atreides has, wanting to change the natural habitat and environment of the Fremen to further suit the colonizers, or the Atreides in this case. They do this instead of caring about the native environment. Such a large change of environment could directly negatively impact the native peoples as they have built their whole nomadic lifestyle around it. And this change to a green environment is not done for sustainable purposes, but rather so the Atreides themselves can live on the planet easier and access the spice easier as well. America had a similar mindset to the Atreides when they were dealing with the native Iraqis. Over time, the Tigris and Euphrates rivers became highly polluted with industrial waste. This was due to the newly introduced oil refineries. This displays how, although America might have brought democracy and eliminated the previous corrupt leadership, similar to the Atreides and the previous Harkonnen, their own needs outweighed the peace and prosperity of the native people, and they were willing to hurt the environment in order to help with their extraction of the natural resources present, in this case oil and raw materials.
Unsafe water is a major cause of health issues in Iraq, where decades of instability has left critical infrastructure unable to support a growing population. In Baghdad, the major treatment plants are strained under double their intended capacity.
The other sustainable development goal that I believe both empires violate is the goal to bring peace, justice, and strong institutions, which is Sustainable Development Goal 16. The Atreides violate this policy through the actions of the Duke's son, Paul, of House Atreides. Paul uses the Fremen as a weapon of destruction to allow him to eliminate other houses that are competing for the control of spice. Paul himself mentions that he doesn't want to become a god and lead the Fremen onto a warpath, but that it's what he must do. Utilizing the Fremen as a militia group directly violates this SDG by impacting on their previously peaceful, nomadic life, forcing them to instead join a war that the Atreides started. America also violates the same goal in a similar way as the Atreides. The U.S. turned to groups such as the Sons of Iraq to help fight against Iraqis that still supported Hussein's regime, which was ruling prior to the U.S. takeover, according to Mohammed in A Coalition of Negatives. In both cases, the countries weaponize the local peoples in order to achieve their own goals. That doesn't necessarily help elevate the goals of the native peoples. Both countries violate two important SDGs of peace, justice, and well-being, and strong institutions. Although both empires, the Atreides and the Americas, brought a form of hope or democracy, their ulterior motives centered around extraction of the natural resource spice and oil. They both also misuse their respective environments and people in order to achieve their goals, placing their own interests over those that they ruled over. The book Dune serves as a warning that even though empires may appear as benevolent or as saviors, it is important to question their underlying intentions and goals, and that even the most benevolent and well-meaning empires will always be self-interested regardless of who it affects.